Welcome to this video lesson on the poem Love's Farewell by Michael Drayton. This poem is prescribed by the Independent Examinations Board for the Grade 12 curriculum of 2020 to 2022. Take note of the image that I have selected for this title slide. After you have studied the poem, you should come back to it and decide whether it's a good choice to convey the meaning or theme of the poem. Drayton's life straddled 2 centuries, the 16th and the 17th. He was a prolific writer who worked hard at his craft, despite somewhat humble beginnings. A contemporary of Shakespeare, his work was recognized, so much so that he was accorded the honor of being buried in London's Westminster Abbey. He is renowned for his pastoral poetry, which idealizes rural life. Drayton's work is echoed in the poetry of John Donne and Christopher Marlowe, and some of the artwork of the time. Drayton enjoyed writing bodies of work, such as the 9-poem collection entitled The Shepherd's Garland, with each poem being dedicated to the 9 muses. This slide is just additional information. You can't go through 12 years of school English without hearing about the 9 Greek muses. You might have seen them in the Disney movie version of Hercules without knowing who or what they were. Each of these muses is said to inspire artists in different genres. For example, if you write or perform comic pieces, then you would be influenced or inspired by Thalia, the muse of comedy. For your own edification, pause the video and familiarize yourself with the names of each muse and their areas of influence. Michael Drayton saw 2 significant periods of history during his lifetime. He was born into the Elizabethan era, named after the reigning monarch of the time, Queen Elizabeth I. It was considered a golden age by the English. By their standards, it was a politically stable time. There was money and the political will to explore and expand the territories of England. You might have heard of Sir Walter Raleigh, one of the most famous explorers of his day. He sailed across the Atlantic Ocean and founded a colony which he named Virginia after his virgin queen Elizabeth. It remains the state of Virginia to this day, one of the 50 states of the USA. In terms of the arts, it was the period of the Renaissance, in which writers, musicians, composers, painters, and actors flourished. We are familiar with the works of William Shakespeare, who wrote dramas and poetry. He popularized the Elizabethan sonnet format, which we study so often. A friendly reminder: all of Shakespeare's sonnets are Elizabethan sonnets, but not all Elizabethan sonnets are Shakespearean. It depends, of course, on who wrote the sonnet in question. After the death of Queen Elizabeth, King James ascended the throne, introducing the Jacobean era. The golden age of Elizabeth's rule gave way to disillusionment and a challenge to the class system. The newly wealthy merchant class challenged the traditions and prejudices of the nobility. Michael Drayton was a witness to significant changes in his lifetime. As we move now to study the sonnet itself, you should have everything prepared for your analysis. My students know that this spider diagram or mind map is my preferred method of taking notes. but you are free to use any system that works for you. You'll need different coloured pens or pencils and a hard copy of the text of the poem. In these video lessons, I try to introduce you to as many different methods of poetry analysis as I can. This one is the SIFT method, where you focus on the symbolism, the imagery, the figurative language, and the tone and theme of each poem. Incorporate this into your own note-taking. It is important to note that this sonnet, Love's Farewell, is number 61 of 63 sonnets published as an anthology entitled Idea in 63 Sonnets. It is thought that Drayton wrote these poems to the married daughter of one of his benefactors. In other words, these are poems about unrequited love. Drayton tells us in the title of the first sonnet that they are addressed to Idea, the reader of these sonnets. In Sonnet 60, the one preceding our one, Drayton writes of the highs and lows of love. In this sonnet, number 61, he writes of the end of a relationship. In the following sonnet, number 62, he writes of his sense of loss and sadness at the end of the relationship. We are therefore studying one sonnet in a series of sonnets. Without further ado, let's get started with Michael Drayton's Love's Farewell. Since there's no help, come let us kiss and part. Nay, I have done, you get no more of me. And I am glad, yea glad with all my heart, that thus so cleanly I myself can free. Shake hands forever, cancel all our vows, and when we meet at any time again, be it not seen in either of our brows that we one jot of former love retain. Now at the last gasp of love's latest breath, when his pulse failing, passion speechless lies, when faith is kneeling by his bed of death, and innocence is closing up his eyes. Now if thou wouldst, when all have given him over, from death to life, thou mightest him yet recover. I've always told my students to start with the title of the poem in question. This one presents us with a challenge. In the prescribed anthology, Clusters, it is entitled Love's Farewell, which is useful as it informs us about the theme of the poem. In other anthologies, it is entitled simply by its number, 61, or by the first line, Since There's No Help. We'll go with the title given in Clusters. You are all familiar with the structure of Elizabethan sonnets. 14 lines in iambic pentameter with 10 syllables to a line. There are 3 quatrains in which the poem's message is unravelled, and a concluding rhyming couplet in which the true purpose of the poem is revealed. In this sonnet, it could be argued that the couplet is the volta or turning point of the poem. The poem appears to be an address to someone. This poetic device is called an apostrophe, which has nothing to do with the punctuation mark of the same name. Here it appears as though we are interrupting someone's speech, the interlocutor. The first word of the first line, since, conveys this sense of the interruption of someone's train of thought, as does the dash at the end of the first line. The speaker is addressing his lover. and exhorts her to end the relationship. Take note of the use of pronouns and possessive adjectives in this poem. You will see in the first quatrain how the emphasis is on the speaker, I, me, myself. The speaker is quite forceful, giving instructions to his lover. He tells her that they should kiss and part, as there is no help for their relationship, and that she will get no more of him. He repeats that he is glad to be free of her. In fact, he is glad with all his heart. This is an emphatic statement. There is no turning back. The crisp, curt alliteration of the k sound in the last line of this quatrain adds to this effect. He is obviously dismissing any thoughts of counseling or mediation in this relationship, isn't he? The tone of this poem is important. You do remember the difference between tone and mood, don't you? The writer employs a certain style of writing, in this instance an Elizabethan sonnet, and uses a specific tone to convey his thoughts. The reader, that's you and me, respond to that piece of writing with a mood. So tone is the writer's feeling, while mood is the reader's feeling. Watch out for changes in the tone of this poem. Try to pinpoint where they take place, backing your opinion with close textual references. In the second quatrain, there is a change in the pronouns. Instead of the first person singular, I and me, it becomes plural, we and our. The speaker seems to make suggestions as to how the lovers should conduct themselves in the future. He appears to suggest that they should act as though they were never lovers at all. The change in the pronouns, however, is significant. He is thinking of them now as a couple, not as individuals. Could this be a clue as to what he really thinks? Is his desire to part ways with this woman a heartfelt one? The fact that Drayton used the Elizabethan sonnet format and the use of personal pronouns must surely be a deliberate ploy to develop the central theme of love. The tone is decisive and assertive, which indicates that his mind is made up, that he wishes to cancel any vows that they might have made, so that not a jot of their love remains. Jot is a lovely word. It means a tiny bit, a spot. He wants to expunge every sign of their relationship, no matter how small. The use of the word browse is an example of synecdoche. It's a figure of speech where the word, browse, represents the whole. Here the speaker is not just referring to eyebrows. He means that every part of the face must not betray their former affair. The eyes, the mouth, everything. You might find some analyses that indicate that this is an example of metonymy. Strictly speaking, it is synecdoche. The concepts are very similar, but they're not interchangeable. Pause the video and have a look at the differences, as indicated in the table on the right. The third quatrain starts with the word now, indicating a sense of urgency. How would the quatrain have been different if it had started with but or then? In this quatrain, the speaker describes the end of the relationship as the death of love. Although love is dying, it's not quite dead, suggesting that there might be a glimmer of hope for the resurrection of the affair. Drayton makes use of personification to convey this message. The image here is of a dying love surrounded by passion, faith, and innocence, all aspects of romantic love. The personification of love here, along with passion, faith, and innocence, gives energy and life to abstract concepts. Drayton evokes a vivid image of love's last agonizing moments, which, whilst a little dramatic by today's standards, accurately reflects the feelings which are typical at the end of a passionate relationship. It is a dramatic image, almost exaggerated. This use of hyperbole could be intended ironically, a means of tugging at the heartstrings of his lover. Why do you think faith, passion, and innocence would be likely figures around love's deathbed? Passion is supposedly the first thing to die when you fall out of love. It is therefore appropriate that passion is the first to appear at love's deathbed, and that the loss renders passion speechless. Faith means devotion and a belief or trust in someone or something. When you have lost all faith, well, then there can be nothing left. The religious connotations make it appropriate that faith kneels next to the bed when love is dying. When people first fall in love, they believe it will last forever. In their innocence, they are filled with hope for the future. It is innocence which closes love's eyes, because it is at this point, when innocence is lost, that a lover finally realizes that a relationship is over. Did you notice how the pronouns have shifted again? From the first person singular to plural, and now to third person. The his here refers to the figure of love lying on his deathbed. This accompanies a significant shift in the tone. There is extensive use of alliteration in this quatrain too. The repetition of the L sound highlights the word love. The repetition of the plosive P sounds could emphasize the emotional aspects of love, which are now fading. It is possible that the concluding couplet reveals the real purpose of this exchange, this conversation. The speaker seems to suggest that their love could be rekindled if the other person would declare her love for him. The couplet is introduced with a dash, representing a change in topic, even a change in theme. The tone also changes. There is a hurry to these lines, while the speaker appears to contradict what he said in the preceding 3 quatrains. This is emphasized with the exclamation mark at the end of the couplet. Once again, you need to take note of the pronouns. In Elizabethan times, the pronoun thou was considered informal, colloquial, while you was considered formal. In Afrikaans, the pronoun jy is used for friends and family, while u is used to denote respect towards someone. In English, you is the equivalent of I, and thou is the equivalent of ye. This emphasizes the idea that the fate of this relationship is in the hands of the speaker's lover. The speaker seems to be saying that just as love takes his final breath, all is not lost. There is still hope for this relationship, if this is what the lover wishes. The message of this poem is reinforced by the poet's use of the different moods of verbs. In English, verbs have 4 moods: imperative, indicative, subjunctive, and interrogative. The poem starts with the verbs in the imperative mood, issuing instructions or commands. In the third quatrain, the mood of the verbs changes to the indicative, where statements of fact are made. In the couplet, the mood changes to the subjunctive, where the speaker expresses a hypothetical situation, possibly a desire for the relationship to be restored. Some critics have suggested that this poem could be read as a dialogue, with one speaker saying line 1, while the second speaker replies with lines 2 to 4, in which she rejects the suggestion that they should kiss and end the relationship good-naturedly. Pause the video and read through this table, understanding the difference between a monologue and a dialogue. What do you think? Is the sonnet a monologue, or could it be a dialogue? Do you remember the picture that I used on the title slide? Do you think that this is a good image to convey the essence or the meaning of the poem? Why or why not? It's time for some questions. Write your answers in your poetry notebooks. Take time to give detailed answers, referring extensively to the text. Remember that everything you write must be substantiated with references to the poem. Use quotation marks if you are quoting directly from the poem. Here are your 5 questions. The first one asks about the addressee of the poem. The second and third questions require you to paraphrase the first 2 quatrains. Remember that when you paraphrase, you are expected to rewrite the text using your own words in clear and concise English. The fourth question asks you to explore the use of pronouns in the sonnet, while the last question asks you to identify a theme in the poem. Pause the video and write your answers. If you have finished with the questions, you can move on to the next slide for the answers. But do them first. It's great practice in writing answers and gathering your thoughts on paper. Come on, write your answers first and then go to the next slide. Okay, let's check your work. The speaker is addressing a former lover. Make mention of the title of the poem and the use of direct address in pronouns. In the first quatrain, a conversation is interrupted, a conversation in which the speaker convincingly gives reasons for ending a relationship. The ending of the relationship is not as straightforward as it appears, however. In the second quatrain, the speaker is emphatic. There must be no further interaction between the two. It's harsh. It's final. Or is it? We spent quite some time looking at the use of the pronouns when we analysed the poem. You should have written a fairly lengthy answer to this question. Pause the video and see if you got everything. The most obvious theme to explore in this answer is that of love. You are required to show how love has been portrayed throughout the poem. Again, pause the video and read the model answer carefully. Did you write your own answer in enough detail? In the IEB exam, you could be asked to consider a visual image with the poem. What do you think of these two? Do they convey the meaning of the poem to you? The one on the left is a clip art image showing someone about to cut the link between himself and his partner. But do you see that the string has not been cut? What's holding him back? The picture on the right is a reproduction of a very famous painting by the Austrian painter Gustav Klimt. It is called The Kiss and shows a pair of entwined lovers. When it was first exhibited, it was called The Lovers. In the IEB exam, you can also expect an unseen poem to be paired with any of the seen poems. Compare this sonnet by William Butler Yeats with Love's Farewell. How does this poem represent the theme of romantic love? What is the message of this poem, and how does it compare with the message of Drayton's sonnet? If you do this, along with all of the other analysis and thinking in the preceding slides, you'll be well prepared for a formal assessment on this sonnet. And that's it for Love's Farewell. I trust that you found this video lesson useful. If you did, please subscribe to the Mrs. M Teaches English YouTube channel, like the video, and share it with your friends. Join me in assisting other South African students and teachers in getting resources to them at no cost. Until the next time, keep well, everyone.